In the present lecture, we intend to examine the inscriptions of Sanchi. Sanchi is located in the Rayasin district of Madhya Pradesh. In the early centuries of Christian era, it was a very important settlement of Buddhist monks, and it has a long history, the history which traverses a period of about 1600 years. It was originally settled in the 3rd century BC. People continued to build monuments and continue to build beautiful stupas in this area for a period of 1600 years. The stupa of Sanchi still remains a beautiful monument to the artistic achievements of people who lived in the 2nd century BC. Now, we intend to study the inscriptions of Sanchi because in a certain sense it's a key to understanding many features of the history of Madhya Pradesh and in many ways the history of India. Madhya Pradesh, as we know, is a place which represents an area of transition between North India and South India. It typically shows many features that are characteristics of North India and at the same time many other features which characterize South Indian traditions. However, in today's world, Madhya Pradesh is generally regarded as an area which speaks Indo-European languages, an area which has typically the kinship tradition, the tradition of marriage, the tradition of family that belongs to North India. If we examine the evidence from the inscriptions of Sanchi, they can provide us interesting ideas about what could have been happening in this area in the 2nd century BC. Sanchi is also important because, as we know, the Brahmi script, which is the earliest script of historic India, was deciphered by Sir James Prinsep. And James Prinsep managed to decipher Ashokan inscriptions, which is also written in the Brahmi script. He managed to decipher these inscriptions with the help of inscriptions from Sanchi, because he assumed that many of these inscriptions, which have words like gift of Isidasi from Ujjain, normally in Sanskrit they will end with the words Danam, Isidasasa Danam. So the first words written in the Brahmi script that could be deciphered and read were the words Danam from Sanchi. And once he managed to read these 2-3 letters, he managed to decipher and read other letters that are connected with the Brahmi script as such. Now, what I intend to do in the present lecture is to try and examine some notions that connect with the idea of kinship at Sanchi. It's important for us because, as all of us know, in the tradition of sociology and anthropology, the study of kinship and family and marriage is a key element of the social structure. While historians have focused more on categories like class, on categories like developments in the field of economy and religion, they have generally ignored issues related to the study of kinship, related to study of changes in patterns of kinship. So we have very little information about the kind of family structures that prevailed in India in early periods of history. It's normally assumed that family has remained the same from the early Vedic period onwards, meaning that whether we are talking about a family of the early Vedic period, whether we are talking about a family of the Gupta period, or whether we are talking about family in today's India, all of them had the same kind of a structure. Now this needs to be questioned and this needs to be historicized. In today's India, we know that there are various kinds of kinship traditions. The two major kinship traditions in India are called the Indo-Aryan kinship tradition and the Dravidian kinship tradition. When we talk about Dravidian kinship tradition, it has some significant variations from the North Indian counterparts. One major difference is that in the Dravidian kinship tradition, there is the practice of what is called cross-cousin marriage, meaning that in Dravidian traditions, people can marry their mother's brother's daughter, something that is prohibited in the North Indian tradition. Now that brings about a very significant difference in the understanding of kinship for South Indian areas like Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. These practices, when we talk about the Dravidian tradition, we talk about a distinctive linguistic tradition and we also talk about a distinctive kinship tradition, which varies from North Indian linguistic tradition of Indo-European languages, and the North Indian linguistic tradition is also connected with this patrilineal patriarchal tradition which prevails in this part of the world. Now when we talk about South Indian linguistic tradition and South Indian kinship tradition, which I am using as an example of the Dravidian kinship tradition, it's interesting that the marriages in South India take place between villages which are closer to each other compared to marriages in North India. In fact, according to some studies, the South Indian marriages, if they cover an area of about 6 or 7 kilometers inter-village distance, in North India, it will extend to about 70 kilometers. So there is this exchange of women between patrilineal structures. In North India, women have to move away to other households which are located at a much greater distance compared to South Indian counterparts as such. Now, if we study the inscriptions at Sanchi, what is clear is that most of the kinship terms, they seem to indicate that the prevailing practice was that of North Indian Indo-European kinship structure. However, some scholars like Professor Kumkum Roy, have noticed that these inscriptions do not show the evidence of the presence of father's brothers, or for that matter other relatives like father's brother's wife or father's brother's son. She has concluded on that basis that maybe the kind of family structures that existed were very different in those times. However, if we examine the evidence carefully, we realize that it has got to do with some of the limitations of the language that they were using. If we look at the Pali, Prakrit and Sanskrit languages, it turns out that the term for father's brother is almost absent. Although there are words for it, they are rarely used in any of these languages. Similarly, father's brother's son is normally called by the same term as one's own son, and father's brother is called by the same term as father. So Pita can be used for father as well as father's brother, and son can be used for brother's son as well as one's own son. This becomes evident if we look at the evidence from the Mahabharata, where Dhritarashtra has to make a distinction between his own children and children of his brother Pandu. In fact, he simply does not have a word to distinguish these two categories of children, and he seems to struggle. The Mahabharata evidence shows that he is all the time trying to say that they are not my children, except that his language does not have the words to express this sentiment. In fact, the popular words in North India today are chacha, chachi and chachera bhai. These are terms which are Turki in origin. They came with the Turks who came to India in the 12th, 13th century, and they became popular in the North Indian languages. This seems to indicate to us that although the Sanchi inscriptions do not mention names of categories for father's brother or father's brother's son, we can safely assume that these categories are covered by terms like son, terms like brother as such, or terms like father for that matter. They safely cover these categories. Now, apart from that, we have also evidences from other texts from ancient India that seem to indicate that there were joint families which existed in early India in the later Vedic period, or for that matter even in Arthashastra, that is around 2nd century BC to 2nd century AD, we had families where father and father's brother lived together in one household. What I intend to examine now is to see the evidence for other kinds of kinship system that might have prevailed in this area. As pointed out earlier, most of the donors who came to this place, they came from various areas of Madhya Pradesh. Although some of the donors mention places which have been located in Rajasthan, in present-day Uttar Pradesh and in Maharashtra. However, most other places, they seem to be located inside Madhya Pradesh itself. Now, what is important is that when they mention their kinship categories, they obviously reflect the practices of the particular geographical area that we call Madhya Pradesh. It's important for us because there are many inscriptions which seem to indicate that a different kind of family structure prevailed in many areas of Madhya Pradesh. Now, this different kind of family structure can be culled out, can be discovered by carefully studying the inscriptions of Sanchi. As pointed out earlier, these inscriptions are very, very short. But if they are telling us about their kinship identities, some of these kinship identities seem to indicate that probably they didn't belong to the Indo-European system of kinship. One such example is that there are many people, many women who have given gifts. They refer to themselves as mothers of women, meaning that they say, I am this woman's mother and I am giving gifts. Now this is a practice which is not generally followed in North India. In North India, if women are trying to define themselves in terms of their identity, they will normally define themselves as the wife of so and so, meaning that they will mention a male. Similarly, they will mention a son. They will say that I am the mother of such a person, such a male as such, rather than a female. So if they are mentioning that they are mother of a particular woman, that seems to indicate a different kind of family structure. There are other inscriptions where mothers, daughters and sisters are making gifts together. Again, this is a practice which seems to be slightly at variance with North Indian practices. Normally, gifts given today are by a husband-wife combination. The gifts are normally either given by males or females for that matter. Sometimes they give independent gifts, but here is a situation where 3-4 women come together and give gifts, which seems to indicate a greater independence for these women who have certain resources available to them to be able to make these gifts. It's important for us to remember that the Dravidian kinship system allows greater freedom to women, greater control over resources to women, which is not the case with the North Indian Indo-European family system. Then there is this case where men refer to their identity as son of women. Again, in the North Indian tradition, when men are referring to their identities, they will mention the name of their father. Even today, most of the forms that we fill up for applying for admissions in colleges or applying for jobs, we write our names and we write the names of our fathers. It's very rare that we come across forms where we are expected to write the names of our mothers. So if there are inscriptions where men are mentioning themselves, identifying themselves as sons of some woman, it definitely seems to indicate a different pattern of kinship compared to North India. Then we also have some interesting gifts by this person called Varadatta. He seems to have been a very rich person because he gave several gifts in Sanchi, and gifts which would have required enormous resources because Sanchi has got very rich carvings which will require enormous amount of labor and also skill as such, very high degree of skill which could create such carvings as such. So Varadatta, one of the gift givers, has given 5-6 such gifts. But what is interesting about this person is that he gives his gifts along with his sister, or for that matter his sister's sons. Now this is again a pattern which does not fit into the pattern of kinship structure in North India. In North India, the normal pattern is that at a certain age, a woman is married off, a girl is married off to a family, and then she is considered part of the groom's family. She loses all her links with the own family, with the family of her birth, and normally, traditionally, she also had no property rights over her parents' family as such. So in a certain sense, the woman becomes permanently a part of the family where she has been married off. So in traditional India, one rarely comes across examples of gift giving where a person gives gifts with his sister and his sister's children. So if Varadatta is giving gifts to his with his sister or with his sister's children, this definitely seems to indicate prevalence of a different kind of family structure. All these evidences seem to indicate that many of the gift givers in Sanchi were probably part of a different kind of family structure. This is the evidence that we have is very limited, but this evidence can now be buttressed by other kinds of evidences. One kind of evidence, as we pointed out, when we looked at the place names in Sanchi, we found that many of the place names had name endings which sounded like words from Dravidian languages, which indicates that this area had many places which had names with Dravidian names endings. So you have evidence of the prevalence of a different kind of language. You also have the evidence of prevalence of a different kind of kinship structure. Also, if we look at the Buddhist literature, it refers to this particular area as Avanti. And in many examples, they call Avanti Dakshinapat, which literally means Avanti, the place in the southern part of the world as such. Now, Dakshinapat traditionally in the minds of people who were writing in North India refer to this world which was characterized by Dravidian languages and Dravidian kinship system. So this evidence also seems to indicate that the area of Sanchi and the area of Madhya Pradesh probably at some point in its history had strong elements of Dravidian kinship system. This fact, in fact, is further buttressed by the evidence that we find about the Yadava clans who seem to have lived in the areas extending from Mathura to Ujjain. Now, there are many Yadava clans. We know about Krishna, Balaram, and many of the Yadava leaders who are also worshipped in Indian tradition. If we look at the marriage patterns of the Yadava groups, who were the ruling groups in this area, we find that they also practiced cross-cousin marriage. Now, this practice is more in consonance with the practices of present-day Dravidian kinship system areas like Andhra Pradesh, like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, rather than practices of North India. And that is why it's important for us to rethink that maybe the area of Madhya Pradesh represented the transition area between North India and South India, meaning the Dravidian system of kinship and the Indo-European system of kinship that prevailed in those times. In modern times, scholars like Iravati Karve have pointed out that the area of Maharashtra represents the transitional area between the Indo-European kinship system and the South Indian Dravidian kinship system. It seems that in the early centuries of the Christian era, it was the area of Madhya Pradesh that represented the transitional area between the Indo-European kinship system and the Dravidian kinship system. Thank you.